What's up, everybody? It is Joe Granato from the New 8-Bit Heroes with a NESmaker update. Real quick, while Josh has been working on some really cool updates to the tool, I've been super busy working on both Mystic Searches and GamerQuest. GamerQuest, Mystic Searches is our flagship game that we've been working on for years and is the reason NESmaker even exists and all that. Most of you probably know a lot about that. GamerQuest will be the first RPG made with NESmaker, and we're building an entire module just for that game. These games are dramatically different in gameplay, right? And how they utilize their memory. And as we've gone further to develop both of them, we've had to work on a lot of places for flexibility in our tool chain for things that we never anticipated. The byproduct, for those that can be patient, there's some really cool updates coming to NESmaker. These changes in turn require some significant code rewrites, but with patience, the results are pretty cool. So let me just show you a few of the impending changes and updates using some practical examples in a NESmaker project. So first, I'm going to open up NESmaker 4.4.2. I would open 4.4.3, however, it does have a bug that we're tweaking, so let me open this version right here. The first thing you're going to notice is a prompt to create a new project or load an existing project. This was just a dummy proof button. Some people were starting to create without selecting a module or whatever. And even if you want to make a blank module, that's fine too. But a lot of people were creating and they thought they were making changes to things that they weren't and whatever, and getting confused. So this will force you to sort of either create or load an existing project. We're going to load up just a dummy GamerQuest sort of playground. I'm going to open up projects and I'm going to look at this little dummy GamerQuest playground here. And all of this is a couple of screens that are sort of utilizing actually Dragon Warrior 4's tile set for the most part, just to sort of sell the idea of RPG. And those are temporary assets just meant to be in place while we figure out our own graphics. GamerQuest is more of a cyberpunky, almost sci-fi dystopian world in RPG, so it's got a unique look to it. This was just really for this exercise to show you guys what we're working on. So a couple of things that you're going to notice. There's some changes over here to the menu. First of all, there are some things that are omitted, and we're going to go over some of those. One of the cool things that happens now is with sound. If I right click on sound, you can see now I actually have open Fami Studio. So this will actually open up Fami Studio. The story behind this is that we were creating our music engine. For those of you guys who've been watching updates, you probably saw our music engine. It was coming along really well, and sometime in August, September, Josh got to a point with it, and Fami Studio came out, and it looked suspiciously like the thing that we were creating, except more advanced and finished. So we talked to the creator and asked if we could bundle it with NESmaker, and he enthusiastically said yes, which is awesome. So there's going to be some Fami Studio tutorials. There already are some online, but we're going to bundle some with our software too. We ask that you support Fami Studio, and it's awesome that we're able to bundle it with this, and it still works exactly the same way. So you're still going to create something, you're still then going to export a text file, and then you're going to import that text file here. For now, it still works the same way, but one of the things that's cool is you can open Fami Studio for actually demoing your tracks and demoing your sound effects, and it's a lot more dependable than the thing that we had muscled together for NESmaker in the last version. So that's a cool update. If you want to still work in Fami Tracker, yes, you can still make a text file from Fami Tracker and import it here just the same way you could before. But if you want to try out Fami Studio, or you like seeing that piano roll sort of look better, which I do as a musician, that's an option for you. So that's one thing. Another thing that's going to be really cool is with this version, Messin will actually come as our default emulator with permission from those guys. So the emulator has a lot more hardcore debugging tools. The emulator that you guys have used that's come bundled was just a sort of a spot check emulator that was created by Shiru for this project years ago, and it was never meant for this purpose really. And so the fact that now we can sort of bundle Messin, we've always been telling you, no, go download Messin and link it in your emulator settings. Now it's just going to come, that's going to be the default. And you can still relink it to FCUX or something else if you want, or if a new emulator comes out or whatever. But for now, that'll just come as the default emulator. And that's got like a lot of really cool debugging features and a good PPU viewer and things like that. which make it a really great emulator for this case. But let's dig into some of the more specific things. So I've gone ahead in this project and I've loaded up a bunch of graphics. So if I were to look at my, my graphics, I've got some graphics things here. Let's take a look at just a screen. Let's just go to a given screen. Now, a couple of things that you're going to notice right off the bat that are different. One of them is that I've actually got a tile set living right here on my right here on this main page, this main screen painter page. I have gone ahead and I've created assets, and you guys probably know that process. You go to all graphics, you go to assets, and you pick something like you pick this cornfield right here. You give it a collision and you say cornfield and you hit save. And now it's here in my assets. And if I go back to my overworld, I go to the bottom and bam, there's my new cornfield asset. So awesome. And I could apply it then by selecting it here and clicking, and there it is. Okay. What I can also do though now is I can actually just go to my tile set right here and I can paint it. So I can literally not be adding an asset at all. I don't even have to create any assets to add graphics to my screen. And I can also, you've always been able to do this with the Q, W, E, and R keys. You can change which sub palette it's using from this list over here. So the last thing is collision. What I can do is I can select its collision. So if I wanted these to be solid, for instance, I could check solid. And if I hit the 0 key, if you watch right here, it'll tell you, if I hit the 0 key, that changed to solid. So that's a really cool way. Some people work a lot better this way. Like some people want to make the assets because everything is sort of included on it, and your solid walls will always be solid and you won't forget to add one or whatever. But this is a great way of doing like spot checking and oh, I want a quick change, or there's just some way that you don't want to build the whole asset to do something really quick, and you could do it really fast just by, and this does also have selection, so I could select an area and place it. So that's something that's really cool. And this does work with paths still. So if I go to paths, I have some paths loaded here, and I could load up my paths, and there we go. Awesome. So, whatever. So that's cool. That's a really cool, big first new thing that you guys haven't seen. And alone, maybe that's not all that impressive. I mean, it's cool. It definitely makes things a lot easier. But alone, that's maybe not that big of a deal. One of the problems that we're having is that a lot of you, if I test this real quick, and I don't know what's going to happen if I place my player, some weird things might happen, just bear with me. If I place my player here, little 8-bit Rob McCallum, by the way, 8-bit RPG Rob McCallum rocking out right here. If I look at my PPU viewer, what you're going to see is that I've got my main tile set, my screen-specific tile set, and then my 4 path tile sets, followed by my HUD. And that's the layout that all NESmaker games up to this point have used. And, that's fine and good for most people's purposes. We've found, even when we were making a platform game, we found ways to, use the paths for things. But a lot of people wished that they had more granular control. And, they didn't want to use paths at all, or they wanted more screen-specific tile sets, or, whatever. They didn't want a HUD at all, and they didn't need a HUD. So, there's all these possible things that people said that they wanted, and we completely understood, especially when we started working with different genres, and we could see, oh man, it would be great if we could change that. So one of the biggest things, and I've shown this a little bit before, is simply that I'm going to clear this screen. Let me go to Overworld. I'm going to right click and delete the screen just so I'm starting fresh. Now, I can go to tile layout now, and I've got different modes that I can create. So it's not just, right now I'm using the MSP, the main screen path right here. So I've got a main tile set, I've got a screen tile set, and then I've got my normal paths as they'd normally be laying out. For a lot of genres, this is no good. So there are actually multiple things that I can do. I can make a double main. I could make a no paths at all. So it's a main and then 3 screen specific tile sets. I could also do a half path. We're not going to do that one right now. I could also do a normal but not have any HUD and actually have extra screen specific tile sets there. I could also have no path, no HUD. So I've actually got 1 main tile set and then 5 screen specific tile sets. And then I've got half path. We're not going to deal with the half paths too much. But anyway, this gives you a lot of options. So where that might be cool, for instance, is let's say I do main times 3. So now now I don't have paths, but I didn't need paths. I needed these extra assets here. So I didn't just need my main and my screen specific, but I also needed these extra screen tiles on the screen. And if I had my paths here, that wouldn't be possible. So now you'll see I've got my main and my water here and these extra tiles here. And don't worry about these right now. So now what I can do, I don't have paths anymore. So if I hit 1 or 2 or 3, it's not going to work. But on this tile set, I have my roads. So I can add my roads like this and whatever. And this one will go up. And this is not an optimized tile set, by the way. Now I want to add water. Now, if I change my palette, this reflects the color of that palette too. So that's really a neat thing. And I'll get that and add my water. And let's say I need some desert on the screen too. I can now use this for desert. So no paths here, but I have access to these other tiles. So now I've got mountains. So I've got these other screen specific tile sets that I can use, and then sort of shallower mountains here. And you can see how quick I'm able to just snap this together. Now none of this stuff has collision data yet. So if I wanted to make certain, some of these had collision data, so I'll go ahead and test that real quick just so you can see it actual functional. And there we go. If I wanted to see it, or if I wanted collisions, I could then go into, say, solid, and I could use my 0 key and put it over these mountains, and then they'd be solid and have solid properties. Awesome. So that's really cool. So another really cool thing is the double main tile sets that you can do. I'll show that to you real quick. A lot of you guys are probably going to use this for special screens and things like that. So let me open up this new screen. And in my tile layouts, I'm going to go double main, no HUD. And I'm going to use these. Now, I'm not going to mess with the palettes or anything. This is obviously not the palette that I would use. I'd use something much cooler and electric in 80s. But just to give you a quick glimpse, because I'm using no HUD, I also have these extra screen-specific tile sets that I could use on this screen if I wanted to. I'm going to hit OK. And obviously, I don't want that. So I'm going to go through and just paint this with a blank tile and copy and paste. And I'm going to just select this, and I can just drop it right in, and select this part and drop it right in. Rather than having to create, left click, rather than having to create assets for each of these pieces or one big asset or whatever and drop in assets, I can just paint in, since I don't need collisions and I don't need to know the colors. I can just sort of do that. It's much easier just to drop that in like that. So then I can test it, and we're gonna have 8-bit Rob McCallum standing on the top of the word quest, but you get the idea. I could obviously hide him in the real game if I wanted to, or hey, maybe I like that. So and again, this isn't the color palettes I'd use. I just haven't wired up color palettes for this test. So that's huge, but it could be even cooler. And this is the thing that took us the longest with this update so far to enact. So you see this guy right here. I'm wasting all this space right here, right? So I want to put this controller in here, and I'm wasting all this space right there. And it's a shame because that's just a little NES controller that's not reading very well for you. But it's a shame because really this lines up really great on an 8x8 grid. Paths are one way that we can kind of give some extra depth, but still doesn't get us on the 8x8. For special screens, for win screens, for game over screens, it would be so nice if we had that that 8x8 grid. And you'll remember we used to have a special screen dialog over here that you could open up, and you could create a screen and choose Screen Tool or Photoshop or whatever and import that and then use that as a base to make special screens. And that was 8x8. But it was a really ugly interface, and it was really clunky, and it didn't feel like the rest of the tool, and we never really liked it. So we developed a way that you can actually create those sort of special screens in the exact same manner that you create all the rest of your screens, which this took a long time. We're still working out the last of the bugs of it, but it's pretty much working now. So check this out. What I'm going to do is screens are grouped into banks, and a bank is 32 screens. So on this map, there's 8 banks, and on the Underworld map, there's 8 banks. If I want to use 8x8 tiles, the problem is I'm using 4 times the amount of data, right? If I'm using 8 pixels by 8 pixel tiles versus 16 by 16 meta tiles, I'm getting twice the data going across and twice the data going down. So I end up with 4 times the amount of tile data. So what we ended up doing is we made a system where I can go to Advanced Map Properties, and I can choose which banks use the detailed screen view. And you'll notice now I only have 8 screens there, but each of these 8 screens, this is all in bank 0. Each of these 8 screens can now be manipulated on a per tile basis rather than a meta tile basis. So I can come into here, and you'll notice my cursor is now just showing a tiny bit of the meta tile, just a quarter of a meta tile. So I can actually get in and grant, like, instead of, if you can imagine where this tile was, now I can just grab the very top corner. I can make all kinds of shapes out of this. And just as an example, what we were looking at a second ago, if I double main this and I add this stuff again, and this is not even that great of an example of how cool this is, but let me show you. Hit OK. Now I can shift and grab that and drop that in just like I did. Shift and grab that and drop this in just like I did. But now, check it out. I can just grab the piece of this that I want and put this exactly where I want on an 8x8 grid. And so, in fact, I could just grab, if I wanted to use just the D-pad or something, I don't know how much of that, I could just do these 8x8 sections, like I wanted to just use that for some reason, So you can see just how powerful, I don't know if you're thinking about this, but imagine like paths, this would have been impossible the way that it used to be, like stuff like this, where you're just grabbing. I mean, look at all the extra data that all the extra space I could save, and what ends up being redundant there. So there's drawbacks and limitations to this. This is really not specifically designed for gameplay screens per se, because it ends up eating so much of your data for your maps. But if someone wanted to limit themselves to 64 screens, they absolutely could build a game this way. Don't forget too, though, that your attributes and your collisions, no matter what you do, are still going to end up on that 16 by 16 grid. So if I move this over, you can see it's still going to line up on the 16 by 16 grid. So as I do this, you can kind of see where that grid is. I'll do this. It doesn't really matter like anywhere. So if I click here, it's going to get those 4. If I click here, it's going to get those 4. So that's still going to remain on that 16 by 16 grid, and so are the collisions, unless you write a really complex collision routine, which you could do, that you could judge where your player's X is and see if it's compared to the middle, and you could get an 8x8 collision detection. Attributes, that is a hard NES limitation. So that's just something that's how the NES works. But at least you can get granular sprite graphics now. And where that was really good, especially for, like I said, start screens, end screens, win screens, menus, things like that. But another place it was really good for game request specifically was in the design for the battle screens, right? So let me just pick another screen here. I'll go with this guy. So I want this to I'm just going to black out this screen real quick. Give me a second. I'm just going to turn off the HUD. Black out this screen real quick. And I'm going to select that guy. Copy this. Select this. Copy this. Okay, so you can imagine I just entered a battle screen. And I want to show you what it would have been like with 16 by 16 versus what you can do now with 8 by 8. So let me go to tile layout. And I'm going to use, actually, I'm sorry. Let me do this. Let me show you what it would be like with 16 by 16. So now you can already see the level of granularity I have there compared to the level of granularity I had with the 8 by 8. I'm going to copy that, paste, 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 paste. Okay. So let me go to tile layout. And I don't need this, and I don't need this, and I don't need the paths. Let me just go with like main and 3 screen. And what I'm going to use for this last tile set is this one, because that's as pared down as I can get a frame. I'm stuck to the 16 by 16 thing, the 16 by 16 grid, but you know, more importantly, like I have to go a whole space there. Like I have to go all the way down to there, and look at all the extra sort of room that I have there. If you think about what I could do if I could break this into 8 by 8, look at all the sort of redundant tiles that would be there. Let's break this down. So if this was an 8 by 8, this top is the same as here and here and here. All that would be the same. All this black would be the same as black anywhere else. This up and down would be the same thing as here and here. So I've got all this sort of wasted space here that I'm using because I'm in this 16 by 16 mode, which is how you guys have been using tiles. Now, some of you guys might have used paths for this kind of thing, maybe, but check this out. Now, if I go back to Overworld and I come back over to here and I'm do the same thing, but instead of no path, I'm going to use just this, which all that I had can be expressed with just this much. That whole row of a screen specific can be expressed with just by this much. And then I have a whole nother one of those setups that's a thinner line. So let's take a look at what I can do with this real quick. So now that I have this, I can get more granular with it. I can't remember which one of these is which. There we go, this guy. So it takes a little bit more time to set up, but I can do like an odd number of tiles. That's one thing. And let's see. And it takes up so much less space on my tile set. And this was absolutely imperative for what we wanted to do. Oops. Let's grab black here. It was absolutely imperative to what we wanted to do with Game Request to develop something like this because of how much text will be on the screen and being able to control exactly exactly how many lines of text that were there, you know, when you have your abilities up and things like that. But, you know, also just the conservation of space so that we have more room to make cooler looking monsters, you know. And also, like I said, now we've got thinner lines, so whoops. So I can do cool things like build these bracket systems, you know, inside here too. And I've got that 8 by 8 granularity, so I could be a lot more specific with when I name things here. I could even put text here in one of these groups so that I could put, you know, instead of having to rely on actually procedurally writing the text, if it's always going to be the same, like if it always says battle or something like that here, and, you know, it always says fight, run, whatever, I could put that stuff here without actually using the text or using the HUD, which with HUD graphics, which is great. And again, gives me more room to deal with for monsters. So this was a huge thing, and I hope that even that just starts to get your brain going. Some things to think about too is that these 8 by 8 tiles, Right now, these screens aren't meant to work with like scrolling engines or anything like that. And there's some other caveats to the way that the scrolling I'm about to show you. But the last thing I'm going to show you is scrolling. And, for an RPG, one of the main things is that we wanted to have four-way scrolling like a traditional Dragon Warrior or Final Fantasy. Now, if you go back and you watch the videos of the original Kickstarter, people asked about scrolling, and we said, it doesn't do scrolling right now. Chances are we are going to implement like a Super Mario Brothers right one-way scroll, and maybe do a two-way scroll. Four-way scrolling is just not going to happen because the mapper we're using doesn't really support it really without doing some trickery. Well, we did some trickery, and it's not like this is complex trickery. If you know what you're doing, and this isn't even necessarily optimized, it's still a little bit buggy, but you're going to get the idea. So we've got this overworld, in the interest of making this feel as much like a NES RPG as possible, in the vein of Final Fantasy or Dragon Warrior. That's what Rob really wanted, and so we spent the time. We'd gone another direction where it was very screen by screen. We have an entire map of the U.S. that is a sort of surrogate for real cities and stuff like that. But Rob really wanted something that felt more like an RPG, so we kind of crashed it and went back to the drawing board, and now we've got something that feels a lot like, a Dragon Warrior or a Final Fantasy or whatever. Now, obviously, the map's going to be a lot cooler than this, and you're going to have your random battles and stuff like that. But I want to show you've got these cities you can venture to and whatnot, and go into, and then you go to the arcades, and there's a whole storyline, and it's awesome, and we're really excited for you guys to check it out. But for right now, I just kind of wanted to show you this always scrolling thing happening. And what you're noticing at the top is you're noticing artifacts. And if you ever played games on the NES, even some of the quote unquote master games, Super Mario Brothers 3, for instance, that scrolled in multiple directions at a time, and along the side it has all these artifacts, all these attribute artifacts. Same thing is happening here. Because there is no room to update at the top or the bottom. There's no second name table at the top or the bottom with this mapper. So there's no place off screen to update that for where you're scrolling to. So one thing, though, is that on most TVs, the top and the bottom, about 8 to 16 pixels, is going to be cut off. You're not going to see it. And if any of you have made your game and put your HUD too high or things too low, you've already noticed this. So a lot of games didn't worry about this top row or the bottom row. And there are things that one can do. You can do crazy things like mask off the top row and things like that. We're not going to get into that, and it's probably not going to be something that we're going to do with this engine. It's possible. I know people have done it, but because we need to make that sort of vanilla catch-all engine for RPGs, we're not going to do that. And honestly, a lot of NES games had this, and this was sort of part of the charm anyway. So what we've done is we've updated the tiles on the opposite of the direction that you're moving. So if you're moving down, it's happening at the top of the screen. If you're moving up, it's happening at the bottom of the screen, which draws your eyes away from that anyway. So that's been our solution, and that's just a look at the all-way scrolling, the four-way scrolling, I should say. This scrolling does have caveats. For instance, if you're using scrolling, you're not going to be using paths, because when paths load along the seam of the scroll, paths do a lot of logic to figure out what should be drawn based on what's around them in our engines. And the problem with that is it takes too long to load that seam, and it'll end up you won't have enough time in the frame update to update all that information, and you'll end up having all kinds of artifacts and weird graphics on the screen. The other thing is that this four-way scrolling is not an all-way scrolling. This is specifically meant for this moving one direction at a time, like in an RPG, and it might not be fast enough to keep up even with a platform game, a vertical platformer moving up and down, just because there's more writes when you're going vertically because you're updating both name tables. And so you might not have enough time before you start getting artifacts and things like that, depending on your jump speeds. But it does start to open up the possibilities to, different types of scrolling games. And so we're very excited about the possibility that this is opening up. So I know that was sort of a long video about a lot of stuff that's coming, and there's still a lot of stuff that we need to tweak. We're still having to rewrite a lot of the modules to get them in working form with this version of the tool, since so many changes have been made. Another cool feature that you'll notice is if I go into project settings and I go into script settings, you can now sort of organize your scripts. So, there might have been a huge chain of scripts and you never really need to look at the system scripts. They're there, you can access them, but honestly, those are things that are never going to change, whatever. But you do want to change your init scripts all the time. So you might jump to your init scripts and you can organize this however you want. You can add new folders, you can move things between folders, you can make subfolders inside folders, and we're going to make this even better where you can drag things in and out of folders eventually. Right now, you move it with your arrow keys and you put it in the folder that you want, but it does make it so much easier to sort of navigate through. And a lot of the code structure has changed as well. In fact, there's a whole list of behaviors that we're working on for what will be the ultimate 5.0 version that are basically macros that you can call that lead to subroutines, and they do all these things and more. So there's a ton happening, and that's the reason for the delay in the update. There's a ton of work being done on things like Nintendo Game Request and Mystic Searches and all the other cool things that we have going on. But things are moving forward, and awesomely so, and we're really excited to share all this stuff with you and to get you guys creating with this stuff. And I've only scratched the surface with the major changes in this. There are some other things too, but this video has been long enough. I hope you dug it. I hope you're as excited as we are to use these new features as we are to show them to you. And over the next couple of weeks, I'll be tweaking and fixing bugs and etc. and getting this ready for the Bite Off 2 or Bite Off 2020. I don't know what sounds cooler, Bite Off 2, Biteer, or Bite Off 2020, or whatever, Bite Off the second one. Bite Off the Revenge. So we're getting ready for that, and there will be an announcement of that coming in the next couple weeks, and it's a little bit delayed from our plan, but we have a plan. So super excited. Thank you guys for checking this out, and I hope you enjoyed seeing this video, and let me know what you think.